we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about laughing through the chaos of parenting. And when I say this is one of my favorite topics, it's one of my favorite topics because I love being a mom, but I also love keeping it real about what it's really like to be a mom. I feel like I was sold this idea of this romanticized version of what raising people to become who they're meant to be is. And I bought it. It was sold to me and I bought it. And imagine my surprise when it wasn't fully what I had anticipated in terms of the small print. The small print. I subscribed to something that I was told was going to be an amazingly perfect experience. And instead, what I got was an amazing experience where I learned where I needed to grow. So it was a little bit uncomfy, uncomfy. I feel like at times kids can be like sandpaper in a really great way where they help you understand where you need to grow as a human. It is an opportunity to lean in to the discomfort of making those adjustments that you don't even know you need to make. Okay, they're adorable little pieces of sandpaper and amazing and wonderful. But sometimes when you're being sanded down, it's very frustrating and lonely because you feel like, is anybody else experiencing this? Like, am I the only one going through this? One of the markers of my mothering journey that has been really difficult for me to process, and I've talked about this a little bit more before, is that I have met a lot of moms who, in the middle of their process of raising their children to become, have described mothering as easy, or they've described it like it doesn't have challenges. And that was not my experience, and it left me feeling like I was kicked off the island. Somewhere along the way, I got voted off of the easy mom island. And instead, what I have learned as the reality is that we all have different challenges and we all experiencing mothering differently. We all experience the challenges of our kids differently depending upon our temperament and their temperaments and the things that our kids need. And having the kind of kids that I do that are amazing, brilliant, creative, wonderful kids, the challenges for me lied within me more than it lied within them. And again, that's a sandpaper. That is a sandpaper. I was not expecting that. I was not expecting that journey. And one of the things that was really important to me as I've grown my online space was protecting my kids' privacy, because I feel like I wanted them to be in a home where I was doing what I love and I'm creating, I'm doing all these things, but I wanted to make sure that their home felt safe. And so even in this space where I'm going to be talking about mothering, I'm going to be centering myself because I want them to have their privacy and their experiences. And if they choose one day to share that on the internet, that's up to them. But I'm going to be talking about me and my experience of what it's like raising them. When I became a mother, I was so young. So I was 19 when I had my daughter, and my daughter's now 18, and 21 when I had my son, and he's now 16. So I have gone through the highs and lows of infancy to teenage years, and I feel like my mothering journey has been like I'm a black sheep because I had my kids so young and I did not have any peers around me that had children. So I already felt like I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just a kid myself. And then looking around at the women that were around me, they did not have children. And so I was the only one coming to events with a baby on my hip. And I was the only one who had, my world centered around somebody else. And especially at a time where I was so young and I was becoming. I entered the world of mothering, just lots of question marks, but feeling like this is what I was meant to do. I remember at the time that I held my daughter a few months after she was born, and it just like really hit me like I was meant to do this. I was made to do this. I love mothering. I love nurturing. I'm a really extremely empathetic person, and I really wanted to bring that into my mothering. And I feel like there were so many times where I had to really just laugh so that I wouldn't cry, because the things that I ran into that were probably just a normal part of mothering, I just wasn't prepared for. I just was not ready. It wasn't so much in the younger years. I feel like if I was going to give myself a grade on mothering the younger years, I am really great at newborn to age 10. And then after 10, I felt like this. I felt like, I don't know. What am I doing here? I have no idea what I'm doing. As soon as the brain starts altering a little bit and leaning a little bit more towards puberty, I immediately was like raising my hand to the teacher, like, I need help. And that teacher happened to be a support system that I built in my life via therapist, via, reading books and resources, because I wanted to show up for my kids the best way that I could. And I just kept running into things. And I'm like, I felt like I was smart before this. And then I got there and I was like, oh, I am not as smart as I thought. And it's funny because there would be moments where I would be having these conversations with my kids as I was raising them. And I really feel like raising a kid is helping them become who they're meant to be. You'll hear me say that a lot because that is the way that I view mothering. It is my job to support them in whoever they're supposed to be and not infiltrate them with my ideas and my expectations, but really let go and live with an open hand like they're little birdies on my hands and let them be who they're going to be. But I'd have these conversations and my husband would say, like, I feel like after the conversation, oh my God, I don't even know if anything I said was helpful. And my husband would be like, that was the most incredible thing I've ever heard in my life. And I'm like, really? Thank you, because I didn't feel like it. A lot of times when I got to these moments where I needed to show up for my kids in a way that I was my best self and that I could articulate and communicate and have this like beautiful language to describe something, I realized later on that their brains literally were not even ready to like absorb any of that information. And I feel like I was just really naive to that. I was just really naive. I was like, no, like whatever I tell them, they're for sure gonna get it. No. Again, we're gonna go back to the master class, okay? Step number 1 of parenting. Every single age of a child developmentally is going to be prepared for, different things. And that doesn't mean you don't say it, but just be very realistic with your expectations. That is where I struggled. I think that's one of my biggest struggles in mothering. I came with expectations, and like I said before, like I'm going to help them become, which means I have to let go of my expectations. I'm saying that because I had to learn how to do that, and that was really hard because number 1, if you don't realize that you have expectations for your child, I'm going to hold your hand when I say this, okay? I'm going to hold your hand. Baby, you do. I'm going to rub your little hand while I'm saying it. You have expectations for your kids, and that's okay. We all have expectations for each other. We all have expectations for relationships. But the problem is that when we have those expectations, we then start making choices to try and lead our child into whatever Narnia wardrobe of expectations that we have for them. And spoiler, if you haven't gotten there, if you try and lead a child into a Narnia wardrobe that they're not made for, they will kick and scream and they will throw a fit. They will not get what they get and don't throw a fit. They will throw a fit. And guess what? Your relationship with them will struggle, okay? There will be some struggling. There will be some wrestle. There will be some cracks in the sand. And I did not realize going into my kids after the age of 10 that I had these expectations, and they weren't bad. They were like amazing, beautiful, romanticized expectations. The same subscription I got sold to mothering, I also bought for myself the expectations for their life. And I had to meet the mirror of me. And again, that was uncomfortable. I didn't like that. I didn't like that at all. There's a lot of times that I've had to confront like parts of me that aren't cute and I'm not loving. And I guess that's just the journey, right? Like we go along the way and all of a sudden like we pass a mirror, or like, have you ever done that? Like you pass a mirror and you look over and sometimes you're like feeling yourself like, oh, hey. And then sometimes you're like, oh girl, I didn't blend my contour enough. Like, is that shade of foundation not the right shade? Or, sometimes you're going through life and you happen to accidentally glance at the video camera in the self-checkout. There is no worse place that I look. I've never looked so bad in my life than the self-checkout camera. I don't know what they're doing to that. I don't know what it is. They're trying to catch people, obviously trying to like steal, but instead like I like try and steal a look and then I regret it immediately. I'm just like, I'm sorry for even being here. Like I'll rescan everything again. I'll pay for it twice. Like, can I just have an experience where I don't have to see myself through whatever that camera is? I feel like sometimes that's what it feels like as a parent. You are given the opportunity to sneak a peek at yourself. I will say this, it is not common in my experience of meeting parents that they're willing to sneak a peek at that camera. It is not common at all. And I've learned this through having conversations with parents where I leave a little bit perplexed, a little squinty-eyed, a little like scratching my head a little bit of like, what's happening here? I'm not really understanding what you're saying just because it's so like, it feels so different from the way that I'm moving through this experience. And when I'm talking to them, I will get this feedback from them that they really feel like this experience of parenting is just everything romantic, like every beautiful description of life and love and magic, and like it is the magic kingdom of life. And in so many ways, I can totally relate to that in terms of like, I get to love somebody fiercely and unapologetically and unconditionally. But there's also this journey of what does that look like for me as a human, having to make sure that I have those edges smooth so that I don't cause harm, or I don't create anxiety, or I don't create moments for my kids that they're going to have to process in their adulthood. And when I talk to parents, I have felt at times so desperate to hear somebody say it real. And I feel like a lot of times when moms are approaching this topic, they feel like if I say that parenting is hard, I'm going to be judged as a mother. And I can appreciate not wanting to be judged. I can appreciate not wanting the criticisms, because moms sometimes can be really hard on each other. I mean, I feel like as a mom, I've been really hard on myself. And I feel like there are moms that maybe internalize that hardness on themselves and then go outward. I internalize that hardness on myself and I go inward, and I'm going to like therapists and books and, just self-love and things like that, so I can get the clear vision of who I really am and not let that, judgment on myself or that shame or anything create this version of myself that's not the truth. But I feel like there's this thing about moms that happens in communities where they go outward with their pain or their frustration or all of these deep sorrows or pain that they're experiencing, maybe the loss of the expectation of what they thought their life was going to be like as a mom. And they go on the hunt to attack other moms. And so I appreciate that there's a lot of fear in being honest about mothering, because we watch it. I've seen it myself. I mean, online groups, comedy videos are filled with, teasing this dynamic of the group online, these moms that kind of come for each other, and the moms that are shaming the way you do it, or if you're, doing it this way, or how you're raising your kid. And it's not helpful at all. I feel like it'd be so much more helpful for us to go, teacher, raising my hand, please pick me in the classroom. I need help. Please help me in this perplexing question of what do I do here? So that's part of why I'm talking about this the way that I am, because I feel like an open dialogue about what it's really like to mother and what it really feels like are the type of conversations I want to be having, and the type of conversations I would love to see in the community of women that are doing this job. It is very difficult to know how to help your kid along in their journey. And part of the reason that it's difficult is, again, not necessarily because of the kid, but because when you show up to mothering, you are showing up with your past, your present, and your future. And they're all sitting at the table, and they all have a voice. And I like to think of it like a round table. At my table, not only is my past, so my childhood trauma, my present, the now me, and my hopes for the future, but there's also anxiety. Like I told you before, there's anxiety here. Also PTSD, and those voices sometimes are really loud. Sometimes those voices are louder than my own voice, but recognizing the voices that are at the table in terms of this is the little group of CEOs, experts, and your board of directors that are helping you raise your kid. I mean, your experiences, your triggers, your trauma, your ability to regulate, your skills, all of those things are sitting at the table. And so when I hear moms say like, "Oh my gosh, it's so easy," I'm like, "Can you tell me who is sitting at your table, your internal table. Tell me about the you that is sitting at your table that is saying it's so easy." Because it feels like, are you like showing up real to your own experience of life? Because how in the world are you saying that this is easy when there are all of these other like factors that are clearly communicating out loud to you and to everybody else around you, your thoughts, your feelings, emotions? How are you able to regulate all of that on a day-to-day basis while you have your kid who's also learning how to regulate, while you have your kid that may be going through different moments of their own mental health struggles? Like, how are you able to do this and then say it's easy? Because this is not easy. It is challenging, but that challenge is an opportunity for us to grow and change ourselves and to show up better versions of ourselves so that we can take the skills that we know. If we do not have the skills of regulating ourselves, we cannot teach our kid to regulate themselves. And let me tell you, that one skill of teaching a child how to validate their own feelings, feel their feelings, and regulate themselves, I just can't even say how that is such a gold medal in parenting. Like, that one thing, that is life-changing. If you can do that, if you are regulated in yourself and you're recognizing your own triggers and you're able to regulate yourself so when your kid is triggered, it doesn't trigger you. Oh man, that is just it makes mothering so much more fulfilling, because now you are actually using skills to love yourself first and then help your kid. You know, I heard this analogy all the time, and I didn't realize until a couple years ago how much it annoys me, but it's the analogy of like, you need to put on your life mask first before you put it on your kid, or it's helping someone next to you. And while that analogy is amazing in theory, the part that people miss in that analogy is that when you're putting on a mask, the plane is going down. The plane is going down, which means you are now in the middle of a triggered moment. You're in the middle of a triggered moment. It's not have a slow cup of coffee so that you can show up to like be a great mom, which I love a slow cup of coffee. That helped me a lot. But that is a really simplified like version of this scenario where it's like putting on the life mask first is yes, but also understand when you're putting on that life mask, recognize what's actually going on around you when you're needing to do that. Are you in fight or flight? And this is not the stuff that any moms are talking about. The one thing that I will say that I did not know before I became a mom, write this down. Before I became a mom, I did not know that I was going to have to change the way that I would want to parent to fit the way my kids needed me to parent. Let me say that again. Before I became a mom, I had this expectation that I could just parent the way that felt good to me. But I did not know that my kids were going to need me to parent, not the way I was wanting to parent, but the way that they needed a parent. I wish I had known this. And I wish I had known this before age 10. So if you have little ones, remember this. As your kids are going into their teenage years, it is going to be like they are a caterpillar inside a chrysalis. They are going to turn into goo. And it doesn't matter how much gentle parenting or whatever style of parenting that you choose to bring for your kid. It doesn't matter if you are the Mary Poppins of parenting. Your kid will still turn into goo. And your kid will still have choices that they're making that doesn't even make sense for who they were before age 10. Nobody told me this. Nobody's talking about this. You just find this out. You find this out when your kid becomes a teenager. And everybody says this, because I said it too. Not my kids. It's not going to be my kids. It's not going to be my kids. In fact, my kids will never. They'll never. And then they showed up nevering in the way that no one's ever nevered before. Okay? I had to sit with many, many experts in helping me understand how the kid brain works, because I felt so confused. I was like, what am I doing wrong? What am I doing wrong? Like I have all these skills, like I'm showing up this way, I'm showing up that way. I have changed the way that I've mothered each one of my kids because they each need different things. Which, by the way, if you have multiple kids, that means you're going to have to be doing multiple types of parenting simultaneously for two completely different people with two completely different struggles. And both of those styles of parenting could be completely different from your natural way that you would like to parent. Nobody's saying this. Nobody's saying this. It would be kind of like if you are an introvert and all of a sudden there was this requirement on you for your life and your happiness that you now had to move through the world like an extrovert. Do you know how bad that feels to an introvert? I'm an introvert. I'm like, oh my God, that sounds. I had to do that. I had to adjust the way that I was parenting. Now, that doesn't mean that I adjusted like the core of who I am and my playfulness and the way that I would do certain things, but it meant that I had to adjust my parenting style, and I had to do it all day, every day for two different people. And it is a challenge. It is a challenge. It's a challenge. I really struggle with this because I had to let go of my expectations of like, this is what my parenting experience is going to be like. It's going to be just like this. It's going to be like this. It's going to be Mary Poppins. It's going to be amazing. No, it's not. Sometimes your kids are going to cry on Christmas. Sometimes they're going to have tantrums like they've never had before, and the most random times for no reason, because they're overstimulated or because they're dysregulated. Or your own kids have their own set of struggles, like they're triggered or they have different pieces of themselves that they're grappling with. So they're going to be triggered in different times that you don't know. Sometimes your kids are going to have sensory issues that you don't know about, or maybe they don't. Like, there is just so much to getting a kid to a point of, I feel like I'm going to call it like emotional regulation. Emotional regulation. I was going to say emotional stability, but it's more just emotional regulation, that they are confronted with things and they're able to move through the different things and stresses that they're going to have in their life because they have the skills and tools that you taught them. And I really thought that modeling this behavior would be the only thing that they would need in terms of like being able to get those tools and resources. And for my kids, it wasn't. They needed a little bit more than even what I could give them, and that's where you provide support. So we provided them support and different resources and different tools in themselves and their own journey to help them be okay and to help them experience the world in a way that felt amazing and wonderful and gave them the tools and resources to process what they needed to. But this idea that all you have to do in parenting is just gentle parent your kid or be this perfect example of what a human experience is, and that's all you have to do, and your kid will get, to adulthood or get to their teenage years and be totally okay. That is a lie. That is a lie. That is not the way. I feel like that would be the exception to the rule. If that is someone's experience, I could see that being someone's experience, but it would be such an exception to the rule that it is definitely that hope, that is the romantic hope, but that's not reality. And I really struggle at times when I see online social media talking about mothering, and outside of the Facebook groups, I will see a lot of moms really, really romanticize, the smiling pictures and all this stuff with their kids. And it creates, for me at least, I've had to hide a lot of moms in my social network world because it made me feel like a sense of loneliness, and it made me feel like I wasn't doing something right, when in reality we all just have different experiences, and a picture with a smiling kid does not tell the full story. And so I had to really learn to protect myself mentally and come away from the online space to get my gauge of how well I was doing with mothering or how well I was doing. And my therapist has been so helpful in helping me stay grounded in terms of like what is normal, what's not. And a lot of times when I bring up these like little pieces of myself that feel like they've been shattered along the way because I feel like I didn't do it right, or I wasn't good enough, or I made a mistake, or whatever it is, and I kind of bring them to her like, oh man, here, this is shattered glass. And she helps me turn it into glitter because she helps me reframe the shattered glass and talking about how like the experience of people is so much more common with each other than what is portrayed online. And she was helping me understand, like, when women are talking about how easy mothering is, that a lot of times they're not being honest. They're not being honest with themselves. They're not being honest with their own like shortcomings. They're not being honest with their feelings, and that dishonesty can be so isolating for each other. So my perspective on mothering has changed as my kids have gotten older. There's definitely parts of mothering that were more simple when they were younger. It was a lot easier to make them happy and, just do the play and the silliness of being young. But that's really, when you're in those young years, you are really in the heart of helping them get those regulation skills and teaching them how to articulate their feelings, teaching them how to identify their feelings, teaching them how to accept their own feelings. And in order to do that, I have to do that first. And that's very hard. It's very hard because sometimes when these emotions come up, it's so much easier just to like avoid it or like stick it in the emotional closet. And it's like, you just go right in there. Just go right in there. I'm going to stuff you full. And I'm not going to Marie Kondo any of this. In fact, I'm going to shut the door and hope that it doesn't burst open one day. But the thing is, there's a lot of stuff in those closets that are stuffed with stuff that don't spark joy, and they definitely need to be acknowledged and let go. And this is a very hard journey that is not comfortable to do. And so, seeing the path of mothering, of like, I got to these points even with my kids different times where they were actually triggering the youngest version of me because I was seeing things that they were experiencing and realizing that the younger version of me did not have support in certain areas. And those moments in mothering were the hardest moments for me. And they still come up. It's not as heartbreaking just because I'm working through it in therapy, but I feel like what I found in my journey of mothering was myself at different ages with a broken heart. Oh, I did not know that was coming. I wish somebody had told me that when you mother children, you are going to find past versions of you along the way with a broken heart. And oh man, it is just the hardest thing to have a child in front of you that needs you. And then you are also like feeling your inner child, and you're just like, no, this is a lot. Let's go back to the younger version of me that like read the book James and the Giant Peach. That was a good day. Or like, I loved a bologna sandwich when I was little. Like, those are the fun memories. And that's what I want. That's what I wanted to come up in childhood, of like, oh, I remember doing this. This is great. But instead, like, I found these pieces of myself that I'm still collecting along the way. And I talk about it like packing up your emotional luggage, collecting pieces of yourself, and moving out and moving away from those spaces, I feel like is a really important journey. And of course, not everybody has that journey to go on, which I think that that's amazing and wonderful. But for me, that's not my story. So collecting these pieces of myself, putting them in my emotional backpack, zipping it up and going, come on, little baby bestie, we got to get out of here. That's really hard when you are trying to raise somebody else. My God, what? I can't even imagine why I definitely struggled, and I did not know it was coming. So I'm just like a huge advocate of mental health support when you're in the middle of raising kids, because man, I wish I had more therapy before I even had kids, because there were just like so many pieces of me that I'm like, oh, that's there, goodness. And at the same time, the other thing that I've noticed too in raising kids is that on the absolute flip side are these pieces of myself that are so amazing and so fun and so glorious. Like, my comedy comes from myself needing ways to deal with this situation, these things that are coming up. Like, it's the way that I have had to process the chaos is, how do I find the fun? And I love Mary Poppins because she's like, you know what? A spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down, but also in every task that must be done, there's an element of fun. Find the fun and snap, the job's a game. And that is the line that got me through all of this. It's Mary Poppins saying, listen, we're going to find the fun in this, because if we don't, it's going to be really hard. So part of the way that I have chosen to address even sometimes my kids' behavior or their challenges, I've decided that in that moment where like the me that is just, wants to fix it all, taking that step back for myself and going, can I playfully introduce my kids to this concept that's not so like, I don't want to say authoritarian, but like, you need to do this behavior, child, and instead understand that the wonder of kids is the play. That is the joy and the journey of having these kids and having this experience with them and getting to love them and getting to experience unconditional love. Part of the fun of that is that they are ready to play. Their play and their comedy, goodness, the comedy of a child is just delicious, top tier comedy. I will never forget these lines that I've heard from different people sharing kids. Like there's a creator on TikTok, and she, I think her name is Miss Frazzle. Gosh, I can't remember her name. But she is a teacher, and she said that her kids call sanitizer, hand sanitizer, they call it hanitizer. And I'm like, that's so brilliant. Like that's the most brilliant thing ever. So in my journey of parenting, I looked for ways that I could find the fun, and even moments where I felt like that part of me rising that's just like, I need to teach them this and I want to come at it hard. I practice going to my soft comedian side of like, okay, how can I make this fun? How can I make this a game? I remember there were certain instances where my kids, they made mistakes or they did something that I asked them not to do. And the way that I showed up in those moments were so fun and joyful that by the end we were both laughing and we were both like joking around about it, and they got the message. And I think that that is what I would tell my younger self of like, hey, listen, you're going to find pieces of your broken heart in your mothering, but also look for the glimmers of the sparkle of comedic joy and bliss. And how can you merge those two in this beautiful kaleidoscope of creativity? And there's such a wonder and beauty on raising kids that invites you into using your creativity in a space of teaching. And I heard this along the way in my journey later on, like my kids were a little bit older, when somebody said like, your creativity is actually such an incredible gift as a mother. And I never really saw it that way. I just thought like, this is just how I am. But creativity is brilliance at work. And so using that brilliance of like, how can I inspire my kids' action in a way that is relatable to them, that is fun to them, that's funny to them. I'll give you an example. When my kids were little and I was a single parent, I had to work extra hard on just the practical organization of like shoes being together, socks, and just the odds and ends, the debris of children that were important. So I came up with this line where, and these words and this practice of how do I get my kids to put their shoes into the closet every single time that they walk through the door. I wanted them to think door walking in, shoes go in the closet. So I practiced when they walked in, our habit was put your shoes together like they're friends. So I introduced the concept that shoes are not shoes. They're actually best friends and they love to be together. So make sure your shoes are always together because they're friends. They're going to miss each other. And the way that I probably looked for kids' shoes maybe once or twice in their childhood, because I introduced them to this concept of we're actually going to personify shoes. We can personify feet. In fact, we can personify anything. And anytime that my kids would struggle with anything, I would show up with a rebrand real quick. Children love rebrands. They love a rebrand. It is not asparagus. It is a princess wand. Okay? Tomato soup, that's not tomato soup. It's super soup. Okay? Rebrand it. One of my rebrands that I absolutely loved, and I shared this on my TikTok as a DIY. Okay, so you can go find this video and watch how I do it. I turned the dirty sock bin that was a shoebox into something I named the sock monster. Okay, I took a shoebox, I cut out the mouth, I put eyes on it, and I told my kids the sock monster is very hungry. He only eats dirty socks, and we have to make sure that he is fed. And the first day that I introduced him to them, the way that my kids ran to go find dirty socks to feed the sock monster. So the shoes would go in the closet like their friends, and the dirty socks went in the sock monster. I feel like that is the creativity that we can lean into as mothers that turn this task or this annoyance or the frustration of like, oh my God, if you do not put your shoes together, I'm going to lose my mind. If I have to go look one more time for your shoes, I'm going to lose it, into an opportunity to play. Look for opportunities to play. And when I tell you, if you think that when kids become the goo stage and the chrysalis caterpillar, the caterpillar chrysalis butterfly pipeline, they do not. That goo inside that chrysalis, while they're becoming an adult, they want to play. They want to play. They want to rebrand. They want all the fun and joy and sparkle and silliness of life as well. It just shows up slightly differently. It shows up in a slightly different version of it. But the way that my kids will still jump on my imagination train, and yeah, they're going to be annoyed. They're going to be like, oh my God, Mom, like stop, like whatever it is. That's fine. They can be annoyed. But they're still getting on the train. I know they're still getting on the train. You know why? Because I watch them on the train. Because I see them on the train every time I show up with a creative idea or a creative way to play or whatever it is. It is challenging but simple, right? Like challenging but simple. It's simple in our desires and wants and our expressions of love and joy and laughter. But it's a challenge in staying regulated and staying grounded and staying care-filled with mental health. One of the things that I decided to do when my kids were little as a way to make sure that I prioritized me having the mask on, because, you know, it was chaotic. When my kids were younger, it was very chaotic. And I put my mask on every day in the middle of the chaos. I did not recognize it was as chaotic as it was. But in the middle of the chaos, I put my mask on by doing hair and makeup every day. I did my hair and makeup every day. I'd put my baby in a seat or a little plaything or whatever it was, and I did my hair and makeup every day. And when my daughter was younger, before my son was born, I put her in a little stroller and I walked her to the gym in our apartment complex, and she sat in her stroller and watched me run on the treadmill. And I just remember in the middle of all of this trying to create pockets for myself that felt like me and that gave life to me and that gave a breath to me. And there were times in my mothering journey where that was harder to do because of the complexities of the different challenges that were going on personally, emotionally, you know, financially, like all of the I don't want to call it like debris. I will call it like the storms. In the storms, like it is much harder to get even to the mask to put it on if you are floating in the ocean. So I think that that's another like really big point in my mothering journey that I would say is really important, is like recognizing where you are in the path. Where are you at? Because somebody that feels like they're drowning, their needs, their desires, their hopes, and how they move through the day is going to look very different than a mom who is like having a cocktail on an island. And so I think getting a gauge of where you are on the map is really important, and that's likely going to change in different seasons of mothering. Like for me, the newborn stage was very easy. I really loved it. It was amazing. Like it was one of my favorite stages was the newborn stage, like bonding with your baby and just like all the cute baby cuddles and all those things. That was very, that was not as challenging for me as the later years. And for somebody else, that's going to be completely different. And so I think it would help us as mothers to stop comparing ourselves to other people if we recognize and acknowledge where we are on the map, and that map might look different for somebody else. And also, I think too, like remembering that sometimes where we are on the map and where we tell other people we are on the map are two different places. And so I think it's just like, I don't like to walk into connections with people expecting them to not be 100% honest, but I do understand that sometimes where we are on the map, we're not in a place where we feel vulnerable enough to share, and we don't want to share. And I respect that as well. There's definitely times in my life where I felt like that as well, and you know, different things that were going on. I couldn't even talk about it because it was so difficult and so exhausting. And so I think just like acknowledging where we are on the map is really important, and then offering to other people whatever version feels comfortable for us. But I do feel like there's just so much power in vulnerability of sharing this is what's actually real and this is what's actually going on. And sometimes people look like a duck above water, but below water they are flapping their little duck feet all over the place, and they're not okay. And I feel like I'm really glad to see this shift in, this understanding that when you're not okay, it's okay to say it. And when you're not okay, it's okay to not be okay. And there's not this expectation that we're all gonna be perfect all the time and everything's gonna be happy and amazing. But there is still some of that. And I just feel like it's so harmful for people that are going through it. There are so many people that are just going through it. And there have been different times and different moments where when I have been going through it, I was just desperate. I was just so desperate for somebody to say, hey, I'm also struggling, or hey, like I get it, or even just empathizing with me. And I felt like when I was really struggling and I'd like share like a little crumb of the struggle, I got met with, what is wrong with you? And I'm just like, oh, that was a little crumbly. You don't even know. I got a whole buffet. It is a all you can eat buffet back here, baby. Yeah, so I feel like, recognizing where we're on the map allows us to also move forward in mothering in a place that is realistic, where we can lower and adjust our expectations for ourselves. And that way we can make sure that we're showing up for ourselves and our family. I feel like this online world has also created this idea that like mothering, being a good mother means that you home cook a 3-course meal every day, or you have to be this kind of like Pinterest mom all the time. And there are certain times, depending upon where you are in the map, where that won't emotionally be possible. It just won't. And I did not learn that until I sat with my therapist in the middle of my drowning. And she said, hey, like, where are you on the map? And I'm like, girly, I'm at the bottom of the ocean right now. And I was talking to her about what it felt like to see online all of these women be surrounded by friends or surrounded by these big, huge, bridal parties and, these events and all these people around other people. And she was like, Juju, you are at the bottom of the ocean. We are not going to worry about building friendships, okay? We're going to worry about lifting you up, okay, getting you a breath. And we're going to worry about you being in a place where you're okay. And it was interesting because at the time, like what felt like I needed as a mom and as a woman was like, what I need is just what everybody else has online. And I was struggling to like put on my sneakers so I could take a little walk outside. And my therapist was like, let's actually start with flip-flops for you. Then you don't have to tie your sneakers. And I was like, oh my God, like that's how the struggle was for me. I was really struggling with so much that was going on, and I was just so overwhelmed, and I wanted to do those steps to like take care of myself. I was going to therapy, and I was like trying to make these big steps, but in my mind, big steps were like, I'm going to run 3 miles today. I'm going to go out and make 1,000 friends. And my therapist helped me really get smaller and just take that one small step of like, does it make you happy to walk your dogs? And I'm like, yes, I love walking my dogs. You put on music, all that stuff. She's like, great. We're not doing sneakers. We're doing flip-flops. You're sliding your feet in and you're getting out the door, even if it's for 5 minutes. And I think at the time, if I had shared that that's where I was just emotionally of like, I am so overwhelmed. I am giving all of my energy to my kids. At the time that I was struggling to put on my sneakers to go on a run, everything that I was going to them. And so I really did have the face mask on them. And then the plane was going down. And she helped me understand, one, the plane's going down. Or actually, sorry, the plane had already gone down for me. It was already down. I was already in the ocean. And the last thing that I needed was the shame of, you don't have what other people have. I needed to come back to me and come back to where I was and find myself on the map and give myself a breath and bring myself out of it. And I think when we talk about these times that we've been in our life, what happens is sometimes we feel like people are going to judge us for it. And what's so crazy is that if you've gone through a really difficult time and you have pulled yourself out of it and you've taken those steps and you have gotten the help from a therapist or put on your flip-flops and you have moved through that time, that should be the biggest reflection of how incredibly resilient and strong and amazing someone is. What it takes to get to a point of recognizing where you're at, reaching out for help, and taking those steps in the world of mothering, that should be celebrated. And there should be a spotlight of celebration. Like, Bessie, you should get all the star stickers that there is, because that resilience and that strength and that courage and that determination, all of that is going to turn into what you now get to teach your children in the journey. There's no path in the journey that doesn't include the muscles needing to grow. And the way that you're going to do that is to go through things. You're going to have to walk through things. You're going to have to experience things you never thought possible. And it's going to be challenging, and it's going to be frustrating at times. But the fact that you keep going, and the fact that you're looking for ways to take care of yourself so that you can show up as the kind of mom that you want to be, I think that's the most beautiful thing. And so, this idea that there's this perfect way to go on this journey of raising yourself and growing up yourself while you're learning new skills, and then giving everything you can to your kids to help them get the best start that they can. There's not one way to do it. And, for me, I just have learned that along the journey, the most important thing is just to give myself a lot of grace and a lot of patience and a lot of forgiveness. One of the big capstones I feel like in my mothering is that I chose very early on, even when the kids were young, that if I made a mistake, I was going to apologize, take responsibility, and make a change. And there's a lot of struggles in connections with people where their apology lives on their mouth and not in their actions. And so it was really important to me when I was raising them that I wanted them to hear me acknowledge where I have made a mistake. And then I wanted them to hear from me how I was going to make a change. And then the third step to the apology was actually making the change. And I wanted them to know that in their connection with me, that it was always going to be safe to have a problem with me. It was always going to be safe for them to bring up things that they didn't like that I was doing. It was always going to be safe for them to say, hey, Mom, I want to see this different. And I was going to meet them where they're at, apologize for it, and change with action. And I feel like, especially, when the kids were younger, having this as a foundation of our relationship was super important because they've never known a time with me where I wasn't doing those three things. They've never known an experience with me where I was not being self-aware, acknowledging their experience of me, taking responsibility, and making a change. And that is something that I feel like is really important, especially going into the teenage years, because now they have that as a foundation and expectation for their relationships going forward. If somebody in their life is not going to take responsibility for their actions and they're not going to apologize or anything like that, like that's a moment for them to go, wait a second, like what are we doing here? Let's work on this connection. Let's figure this out, because I want to move forward in this connection, and I can't move forward if you're not willing to acknowledge my feelings or make a change. And I feel like that is a beautiful part of building a relationship with anyone, like acknowledging that they have needs and then saying, I love you, I love me, we're going to work on this together and make a change. So I feel like there's so much more I could get into in mothering. I'd love to know if you have any more questions, or if you're curious about any other areas of mothering. I feel like I could go on about this forever and ever and ever, because it's something that I have just spent so much time working on, so much time reflecting on, and so much time just sitting in the journey of this experience. And especially having older kids now, and a lot of my peers have younger kids, I feel like, gosh, if I could help somebody, just along the way in their mothering, and just seeing something a little bit different or approaching something a little bit different that feels good for them and actually like is an aha moment for them, then I would love to do that. So thank you so much for listening. Again, your comments, your support, your subscriptions mean the world to me. I love that you're here, and I'm so grateful for you. So let me know if you have any questions, and make sure and leave a comment and a like and share and subscribe, because it really helps the algorithm know, hey, this is cool. Other people might like it. So thank you so much, and I'll talk to you again soon. Okay, bye.